This workshop, as I hope you know, is about transforming urban mobility through artificial intelligence, big data, and smart regulation. So we're going to look at how we can apply new technologies and a smart approach to policy making to transform the way people get around cities. Now, if I can just ask the speakers to unmute their microphones if they haven't done already and turn on their cameras. However, if the rest of the group can stay on mute for now. I want to stress that this workshop is going to be recorded, so it is very much on the record, so just bear that in mind. At Science Business, we will write up an article, a story about the session, so look out for that. The workshop is very much intended to be interactive, so we're looking for you to ask questions of the speakers. We'll get to that in the second half of the workshop. Now, if you want to ask a question, please use the group chat function. I'll keep an eye on that, and if I see you're looking to ask a question, I'll either invite you to ask it directly, in which case you'll obviously have to unmute, or I can ask that question on your behalf. We can do it either way, and we'll do that as the time comes in the second half of the workshop. So let me just begin first by telling you who we have as speakers for today's workshop. We've got Gareth Macnaughton. He's Innovation Director at EIT Urban Mobility. Gareth, thank you for joining us. We also have Niels Wiersma. Probably didn't pronounce that correctly. Sorry, Niels. He's Data and Platform Strategy, Smart Mobility at the City of Eindhoven. Thank you for joining us, Niels. And we also have William Wu. He's a researcher at the Imperial College Business School here in London. And we will hear from each of them in turn, but they'll also, we'll get into an interactive conversation as the workshop progresses. I'm just going to set the scene by making a few opening remarks. I think it's no exaggeration to say at the moment that urban transport systems are facing something of a perfect storm. Obviously because of COVID-19 and the challenges and the complex challenges that are arising from that. However, that may allow change to happen faster than it otherwise would have done. So there may be opportunities in amongst those challenges. Just speaking from personal experience, I think London is in quite a sorry state at the moment from a transport perspective. Certainly the suburbs are heavily congested. A lot of people are still avoiding public transport. They're in their cars, and the local authorities are trying to create more space for cycling and for walking. But there's a lot of tailbacks, there's a lot of frustration on the road. So London's in a state of transition, let's say. I just also want to refer to a Deloitte paper I saw recently, which said that surveys, I think they mentioned a dozen countries. They indicated that between half and 3/4 of the people they surveyed are planning to limit their usage of public transport in the coming months, clearly concerned about infection and the pandemic. Deloitte also stated in several regions of China that have reopened, as it were, road traffic levels are at pre-pandemic situation, that sort of congestion, and in some cases have even increased. So despite the easing of congestion during lockdown, it seems that we may have returned to a situation as bad or if not worse than we had before. So obviously the topic today is about how we can use big data and artificial intelligence to help cities allocate resources more efficiently. There's clearly many risks attached to that, and we'll talk about some of those, but particularly risks at the moment if some individuals think the authorities are trying to monitor or limit their movements in some way. It may mean that they resist sharing data or are concerned about their privacy, etc. So that's just one of several challenges. But I'm going to turn over to Gareth to actually give us a fuller overview of the issues that cities are facing as they try and harness data and AI to improve mobility. So Gareth, I'll give the floor to you, and then we'll come on to Niels and William a bit later.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to have a chance to even virtually participate. I very much miss Brussels and the opportunity to engage. EIT Urban Mobility. So we've now been running for about 1 year, and now we're in an actual first full year. So it's an incredible time for us to be working on urban mobility when many of our living lab projects, our demonstration projects, have all been hampered by COVID from March. So we're not going to downplay the challenges that we faced. We won't downplay either the challenges to our sector as public confidence has been diminished. But I just want to highlight that the subsidies, the incredible volume of subsidies currently to urban transport systems and national transport systems, shouldn't be seen as isolated. The hospitality and hotel section has been the same as beneficiaries, small businesses beneficiaries. This current subsidy and this state of shock that we're in is common. So I don't want us to see urban mobility as being a freak of this show. This is a common challenge across this. So let's just put it in context. Now, today we want to talk about big data, artificial intelligence, and the European model. Now, to set the context, from about 2016 onwards, we started to see people become increasingly concerned about artificial intelligence. We've had some quite high-profile academics speak out, and there's polarized opinion on this. We started to see countries within Europe publishing national papers on artificial intelligence with a human context, or artificial intelligence for the service of citizens, or draft artificial strategy. And that actually led up in 2018 when we got from the EU their own, I think it was the Declaration of Cooperation on AI. Okay, so by 2018, there'd been enough member state activity to bring the Commission together with a basic statement. And that's what it was. And there's been a series of progress from 2018 till January, when we actually end up with a white paper, which is quite hefty. And it went from a high-level statement to actual content, which is wonderful to see. Okay? But as we're looking at the application, especially as we're timely moving forward towards the new Horizon Europe, how we actually work with this and what we do is important. To recap, artificial intelligence, to make sure we're talking about the same thing, is a system that displays intelligent behavior by analyzing its environment and taking actions with a significant level of autonomy to achieve a specific goal. Okay, so that's our definition for today. Okay, so make sure we're talking about the same thing. And if anything, there's two branches, and one of them we're going to talk about pure software based, which would be, imagine it's in the virtual world, if anything. So it'll be things like algorithms to work out people's bank financial viability for loans, etc. It can be bots that help you when you're shopping. It can be voice assistants that help you when you're trying to do search functions. It could be face or speech recognition and digital cameras. So that's the type of thing that we're talking about. Okay, so that's in software. But then there's what we call the physical world apparition of artificial intelligence, where we're going to be embedding devices with capabilities to make autonomous decisions. If anything, it's a bit like the fog computing, where decisions have to be taken very rapidly, close to where the activity physically is. Okay? For example, it would be vehicle-to-vehicle communication. There's split-second needs for decisions to be made between cars. There are elements there. And so that's going to be really fast, and there's no point sending it to the cloud to make an algorithm decision and then sending back the information. It's going to be immediate. Okay? So we're going to see both the actual software and then we're embedded physical. Now that's the division that most people have felt comfortable with. I want to put on the table, I'm not particularly comfortable with that neat division. I think it's easy to think about it like that way conceptually, but in reality we're seeing more and more the virtual is impacting our real life and decisions. And that's what we want to try today. We're going to talk a little bit about the top principles we know, but how it affects us and how we should look forward. Specifically in urban mobility, for example, in autonomous driving, we are building huge test beds and labs of intelligent infrastructure in our roads, signs, sensors, all of these things as the car companies are developing, we're investing in infrastructure. And as we do that, we find out that actually the dumbest part of that intelligent system is going to be the human interaction and our inability to interact and actually take over. That's where we see problems with the algorithms and the basis of artificial intelligence. The human is removed once more from that equation and things become automated, okay, and an autonomous decision. And that's where we see the challenge for us is how do we have a level of human acceptability and trust and control over what's being done with data and the decisions being made. Another example would be on large public transit systems. As we're using digital cameras for facial recognition, and security is becoming an important point. It's not just for maintenance of systems. The maintenance of our systems using artificial intelligence for asset management is terrific. It helps us to sweat our assets, and that's a wonderful use. But when it comes to the value-based decisions of security, facial recognition, and monitoring the safety of who gets on a transit system, where did they go off, where did they go on, who did they talk to when they're on that? With facial recognition, there's elements that we could start to see, perhaps there's room for us to be concerned. Now, we don't want to scaremonger today. Artificial intelligence is a wonderful thing. It's going to allow us to do a lot more. It will give us far better computational capacity. It'll help us to analyze. It will back up and give us opinions on top of opinions from medical doctors in farming, in food production, in climate. It's a great thing. But what we want to look at today is how we can actually find positive ways that we can in our mobility. Okay? David.
Right. Thank you, Gareth. That's a good scene setter. And yeah, you've laid out some of the fundamental challenges I think that cities will face and governments will face as well. Now, I understand William at Imperial College has actually been doing a study and some research right now on some of these topics and how AI and data are being deployed by cities. So let's hear from William about his findings so far, and then we'll come to Niels for his experience from Eindhoven. So, William, the floor is yours.
Thank you, David, and thank you, Gareth, for giving the overview. Yes, indeed, we do find a lot of the similar findings that you gave, Gareth, as an opening for the current situation for AI technology deployment applications in Europe. So our research really was trying to look at the impact of AI technologies, and also by understanding the data access, by understanding the applications of the AI technologies in different sectors, including urban mobility, and also the business models associated with that. We also, within that sort of the research, we also look at the barriers, and also the obstacles really for AI developers and also AI adopters to really implement AI technologies into their organizational structure, organizational process. But firstly, is we discover that the top 5 AI industries in Europe at the moment are including urban mobility, fintech, health tech, medtech, and advertising and technologies. And most of these AI technologies focuses on B2B kind of the interactions, which represents about 3/4 of the interactions, and compared to 1/4 for B2C. And actually, if we look at different countries in terms of implementing AI technologies, there are considerable differences in terms of government initiatives and fundings. Our research included, the detailed initiatives come across different countries, such as Germany, France, Spain, Italy, etc. We noticed that although AI has become a hot topic, people have got the high awareness of AI technologies, but mostly for those organizations, AI technologies still stay on a C-level conversation rather than the daily operations. There are a couple of reasons behind it. The major reason is because the concerns about the cost benefit. People are concerned about the technology maturity in terms of AI technology deployment, rather than details about the AI algorithms and AI methodologies. People are concerned about what sort of impact could AI technology really can make on a business level. And so-called sometimes it's not about the AI technology implementation problem. It is about a business change question for most of the organizations. And we find that again within our conversations with different AI partners, AI developers and organizers, and also adopters across our interviews. So interestingly, we also find that currently there are a lot of focuses on the research of AI, but there is only a small percentage of SMAs are university spin-offs. So there is a huge challenge right here concerning about the question, which is, how do you transfer the AI research into the real industrial-led business applications? And this is currently identified as an interesting gap from our studies as well. As Gareth mentioned, it's not just about those concepts of AI applications, for example, in urban mobility. We know that AI could potentially be applied for predictive maintenance, for example, for autonomous vehicles, or potentially for responsive demand transport and fleet management, etc. But actually, really, the detailed challenge is about how those AI developers would be able to take advantage of the good quality of data and also convert that into meaningful algorithms, which can potentially help with the human and machine interactions underpinning the business process. And these kind of the highlight of the barriers for real AI technology implementation and realizing its impact has become a huge issue or a huge challenge for AI to realize its value and to realize its big impact. So interestingly, and we also find some of the key data security issues coming from our AI impact studies. The top risks for those AI adopters and AI developers are data security, data usabilities, and also the associated data analytics and potentially the projected benefits as well. Therefore, securities has been concerned as huge as one of the top issues coming out of our studies as well. So I think I've probably just give an outline very quickly, and I stop here. And back to you, David. I'm happy for more detailed conversations later on. Thank you, David.
Great. Thanks, William. So it sounds like AI is running into some practical real-world problems, both commercial and technical, which we'll discuss further during the workshop. But first, let's hear from Niels about his experiences in Eindhoven and actually trying to implement some of this technology in practice and help with cities' transport systems. So, Niels, let's hear it from you, and then we'll get into the discussion.
Yes. Okay. Hi, everybody. Thank you, David, and thank you all for having me. Well, as you said, my name is Niels Wiersma. You almost mentioned it right. I work as a data and policy advisor for the city of Eindhoven. For those of you who don't know it, it's actually a city of medium size, 230,000 inhabitants in the south of Holland. It's actually the third Dutch main port. It's next to Amsterdam, who's well known, of course, as the capital and for the airport, and Rotterdam, that is well known for its harbor, which we call the seaport, and then Eindhoven we call the brain port. Because we have some pretty big high-tech companies around here. That's also where Eindhoven is known for. It's a city for technology, design, and knowledge. Also, it's a big automotive hotspot. 3/4 of Dutch automotive sector is located in the Brainport region, and we are a testing ground for living laboratory and smart mobility solutions. So Eindhoven is going through some pretty big challenges. We are going to make the city more compact. We will have the central part of the city. It's we have 10,000 new homes and 15,000 new residents. And it will be a challenge to keep the city living, accessible, and livable. And to do that, well, we have seen a big upsurge in smart mobility, and not as a smart mobility end in itself. It's actually a mean to keep Eindhoven livable, accessible, and also attractive for visitors. So to get the most out of smart mobility, we actually made a strategy for it, and it is consisting of three main pillars. First is we want to have a smart mobility ecosystem in the city, and it mainly focuses on mobility as a service. As you can imagine, that is quite a data-intensive system. The second line is about integrated smart mobility solutions. You can think about intelligent traffic systems and things like connected driving here. And the third one is on the preconditions for success to make this all work. And this is more about getting the data we need to get this whole ecosystem working and successfully cooperate with public and private partners. Of course, this sounds all very interesting, but how do you actually do it, and what are the challenges that we are facing with that? Well, the first one actually is, as a city, you can't do this kind of things on your own. The more data and AI solutions depend on so many partners in a data ecosystem, that we really need to interconnect these kind of data chains and to make them work as a whole. So there is like a big interplay between market parties and the government, and we need some good practice and procedures to make this work. The second one is we can have all the AI solutions. But there's also the question of how to make it transparent for the public. For instance, we have a system to get priority for bikes at the traffic lights. So if you approach a traffic light with bike, you get actually a faster green light. But that actually means something for the other traffic that is going to this traffic intersection. So you have to be very transparent as a government on how to prioritize this, and also make sure that the public is aware that you're making such automated decisions for the mobility system in its as a whole. And second, of course, there's the aspect of knowledge of all the components that are needed to make really the best out of the data and the sensors that we all are adopting in the city. As I said before, we are a city and we are a brainport, innovative city where design really meets technology, but still it is a challenge to attract the people that we need to make this all work. So that is the main challenges.
Great. No, thanks, Niels. That's a good starting point of what you're experiencing actually on the ground there. So we are, as I say, we're going to take questions from the audience. If you have them, you can put them in through the chat function. But I'm going to start the discussion going by just talking to the group. Maybe I'll start with Gareth on this about how cities can actually get access to the necessary data, because AI relies massively on data and having the right data. And also having, let's say, real-time, timely access to data, particularly in an urban transport context. So, Gareth, let's talk about how do cities get the data they need. Let's start with that.
Okay. So, one of the good things about Europe's transportation system is we're lucky enough that lots of our regional transport and city transport is in the hands of the government, is in the hands, or even it might be an arm's length body. So the access to the actual bulk of the passenger data is going to be available. Okay. Now the problem is the infrastructures that we've got, and they need updated, and we're actually seeing lots of more technology being rolled out for ticket use, security cameras. We're seeing these bits of elements of solutions that have been put in without an overarching strategy. You know, it's as we modernized. The new bus fleets comes on, the trains are updated, and COVID has made some of the changes in infrastructure, have put new cameras and sensors, and they're looking at temperatures. So we're starting to get a lot more data, and making some sense of that data and using it in an integrated way is a challenge. So the other model we have, which is liberalized, in which the actual data we have to ask, but considering that cities give concessions, for example, they will give a 5-year contract or something to a company, you can organize when you have that chance to renew your concession to ensure that you get the data. Okay? But the third arm of this is the privatized. Okay? So we are lucky enough that many of our cities have contracts and they give out taxi licenses. And again, they can actually get data from formal taxi companies. But we're seeing the rise of the Ubers, the Lyfts, the micro-mobility solutions that are being brought in with some challenges. And we're seeing e-scooters and bikes, etc., competing. That type of data, it's a bit like a Wild West sometimes there. And both the use of how these equipment is used in our infrastructure and our environment, but also gathering that data. So some things that are being done, if you can't get it from them, and if there's commercial sensitivity there, you could try and enforce with new bylaws and rules. You can bully, you can nudge. But I know that there's some of our cities we're working to, for example, are working with telecom providers. And they are actually using the data from telecom towers, and they're inferring transport modes from how people move, the direction, the speed, and they can say, they're bicycles. The characteristics of movements are bicycles. That's walkers. These people are on bus because they go quite fast and they keep stopping. And so there's ways that they can find data, but it would be far easier if we were to step back and think, what is the primary objective? Everyone who's part and who wants access to our intelligent transportation system, everyone who plays a function by default must give information. And that would be a huge change. It would make the job of Niels so much easier. If he can, we've still got the problem of using the right algorithms to make value, but the problem is our algorithms don't work unless we've got quality data, regular and updated. Okay, so it does come back to data, the gathering of data, ensuring of its quality, and I think that's one of our challenges is in a mixed delivery system for our mobility solutions, with innovation happening left, right, and centre. Okay. How do we come with a framework? The default position should be sharing. And that will take a lot of thinking to make sure people can contribute and the frameworks are there.
No, great, Gareth. I think you've laid out the ideal state, the nirvana, actually, as you say, that we get all the data that we need and we'd have it as a principle that data is shared. But Niels, how easy has it been for you to get data from, say, the big internet platforms, from the telecoms companies, as well as from your own infrastructure?
Yeah, it's a kind of a mixed bag, actually. For some things, we do a starting low level and getting the data with our local parties. That goes quite well. We have a successful example already from 2018 where one of our shared mobility car providers, we actually made an agreement with them that in exchange for free floating parking permits, we got the data on where their fleet actually is and what are the movement patterns for us to analyze and to see if there's any impact of car sharing on the city. So that's kind of easy. But then if we want to have it for mobility as a service, we're doing a pilot in Eindhoven, one of the national mobility as a service pilots. And then we have to make like this mobility, the total volume of mobility providers, have them share their mobility data on the trips. Well, aside from the privacy aspects, which are there and which you need to address very carefully, of course, there's also the commercial aspects on having these mobility providers share on a potentially commercially sensitive data with each other. So there's a challenge there, and I can totally agree with what Gareth says. We need some structures to make sure that we do this uniformly, because I can see the commercial party side as well. You want such a system to work as a standard, otherwise you have to adopt it in every city in a different way. So that is really there is a challenge.
Yeah. So it has to be essentially to keep the competitive playing field level. everybody has to be playing by the same rules in terms of data sharing.
True.
Yeah. Let me just bring in William here, actually, because William, you mentioned some of the business model challenges around this, data and AI. And I guess one of the issues is the sheer volume of data and the money you need to spend both to process it, to store it, and combine it, etc. And then related to that, I guess the people resource you need to actually manage that data. So how big a financial challenge is that, William?
Yeah, so really spot on, David. I think resource constraints and also budget constraints are a key challenge for accessing the data. I mean, apparently for example, we have conducted a survey for our AI impact project to really speak to different AI adopters and also AI developers. I mean, from the AI developers' point of view, I mean, when we ask you, how do you access data and how are you confident about your data quality? A lot of the answers, as you expected, saying, hey, we've got a great data governance body within our AI developer firms, and we know how to manage the data for the purpose of developing the AI algorithms, because we are AI technology firm. We rely on data. But however, when they talk about, if we need to have the access to our customers' data pool, really they told us that they feel that the customers do have got a very structured data governance body, which allows them to tap in order to further develop their AI technology, AI algorithms. So that actually gives a bit different perspectives about different organizations treating data differently. And also that lay out a key question. As Gareth mentioned, a lot of the transport data are in the public sector, so they are owned by the public bodies and also the government as well. Also, we have to admit that there are also a lot of private data sets which are equally helpful for generating insights and also generate potential applications. And sometimes you need to really combine both the public and private data sets in order to produce meaningful AI technologies as well. And that actually poses a big question regarding how do you authorize the access to different types of data sets? And also, how would you be able to control the access for really that purpose? We've seen some technology firms trying to develop some interesting data platforms, which can help to give different authority levels for different data accessors. So if you are a public body, you potentially can have the full access, as long as it's for the full, public purposes. Whereas if it is derived for some private interest, and then potentially we need to charge you, and we need to charge a licensing fee, as you mentioned about the business models. So we've seen the varieties in terms of the ways how the data have been accessed, have been used. And also, we have also seen the industries start to pay attention to different levels of the data access, and from both public and private. And then we start to see some technology solutions being able to neutralize, normalize the data as well. So I think it's not just about data; it is also about the cost as well. And for organizations who actually want to implement AI technologies, they need to be concerned about what exactly does this mean, these technologies mean for my business processes. And data is one of the costs, but I would just stop here.
Yeah, no, that's good. We've got a question that's related to this topic, actually, so let's just build on that, because one of the participants is asking, is there any emerging pattern which would be more standardized and would enable European cities to apply easier smart urban mobility and create more economies of scale? So I guess the worry at the moment is each city is reinventing the wheel, taking its own approach to capturing data, processing it, etc. If we had a standard or a common approach, we may benefit from economies of scale. Maybe we can start with Gareth on that, because that's presumably something that you guys are wrestling with.
We have a series of projects actually about this very topic. So mobility as a service, and how cities actually can work. And it's usually multi-cities, so we've got 3 or 4 that are actually working together. We've got some projects on that. And importantly, we're also working closely with a project called UMOS, which is out of the Netherlands. And it's to talk about the European mobility and the transferability, so that the same person with their same needs can go between cities and wouldn't need different cards or have to use their phone. And that way, the citizen could travel anywhere in Europe with the same system, and the data would be swapped between the cities. Okay, so that is going to take an awful lot to bringing a unified mobility system together. And we funded a very short project last year to bring the right actors together. This year, there's a larger amount of money, and the consortium's got bigger, and that's going to take time. Okay, so it's not a top-down approach, but we're trying to bring the actors together. So we are funding a few of those programs through the EIT currently.
Yeah. Okay. I just want to bring in Niels as another question we've got here, which is about. I mean, we're guilty of this here, but we're talking about data in general, and we're starting with the data, and we're not starting with the problem we're trying to solve. There's the old adage about people, creating technologies or solutions looking for problems. So if we start with the problems and then work back from that and identify which data we need, in what particular areas is there a shortage of data that you can't get hold of? What particular challenges have a data issue?
Yeah, well, first off, actually we do. So we do talk about problems and then generally think about data then afterwards. So it's not something that's top down all the time. But still, we are having some problems on getting a hold of data, and the main problem is actually getting insight in travel patterns.
Right.
Because you want to have in your mobility, and in a perfect world, the holy grail of mobility data is actually get insight in the modal shift. So how do the mobility patterns change from one mode of transportation to another one? Like you can have a policy goal. You want to have less people driving by car and going more by e-bike or public transportation. So what you need to do is you need to have like this overview on how many people currently are traveling by car, and then where are they going from the car? Are they going more in the direction of e-bikes, or are they going more in the direction of public transport? So that's kind of the holy grail of mobility data, actually. And actually, if you have this kind of data, then you can make much better mobility solutions that are tailored for target groups that have specific needs.
I mean, some of the internet platforms essentially have that data, don't they? I mean, Google and Apple. During the height of the COVID pandemic, they were certainly letting the UK government know how much travel patterns were changing, how much people were restricting their movements, etc. So yeah, the internet platforms have that data, I guess.
Yeah, and we are having significant trouble of getting it on the city scale.
Right. And is that they simply won't share it, or they want to charge a lot of money for it?
It's mixed. They would like to share it, but there private issues with it. They would charge something, or they don't even have it on the city scale, or they don't generate it in such a low level that it's useful for us. You can imagine we want it on a very granular level because we want to say something about patterns to specific work locations, for instance.
Yeah.
If like a country image, it's not as useful as on postal number level.
Yeah, it's the granularity that really counts. Yeah. I mean, as Gareth's just pointing out in the chat, this takes us back to one of the broader discussions at this event, which is around this question of European sovereignty and having control over our own destiny here in Europe. And obviously that's something that the policymakers are looking at the moment. Gareth, just to build on that, in this context, what steps does Europe need to take to have that sovereignty?
Okay. I think, we would be naive to actually not appreciate the technical division that's going to be happening, and the ramping up of the rhetoric is actually mimicking some of the technological divisions that are going on between China and the US, and Europe's a little bit in the middle. We have to understand, I think, that one of our ethical guidelines, China has the government approach, and all data is held by government, and that's fine. And then we're looking at whatever algorithm that they will make, they can implement as they see fit. And we know it's not necessarily being used in a positive way. Now, in America, it's the other model. It's the business owns all the data, and they can do as they see fit. Now, Europe has a problem because we've set principles, freedom of association, freedom of movement, etc., principles for data protection. And our concern is the algorithms that the companies are currently using, they're disassociated from, if it's shopping, it's finance, it's not day-to-day life. But when it comes to public services like transport, these are rights of our citizens. So when we look at some of the top level that we've discussed, in that ethical algorithms and artificial intelligence should comply with the law. There's not much that can be done with that, because one of the problems is the technological innovation cycle is 12 to 18 months, and the law's behind it, and we're desperately trying to catch up. And what we're seeing is that high volume usage of AI in these industries is setting the standards for what the industry expects to get away with, and the public's rollover compliance with what's there. So we've got the catch-up issue. And I think Gunnar highlighted, we're starting from the problem side. Lots of activities we're doing may not need the artificial intelligence algorithms, and maybe some of them shouldn't have them. Okay? We shouldn't allow that. We've seen some recent cases where in other sectors, when algorithms are allowed to do the work, to simplify the process, but there's value-based decisions we make. And value-based decisions do not lend themselves well. And so if it comes to a transit system, if it's a security issue, and our AI algorithm decides to not let someone get on a transport, train or a bus, currently we've seen algorithms already working on America on airplanes, okay? That type of thing wouldn't be good for Europe. Our cities are so dense and compact, we can't have off-the-shelf algorithms from other people. We need to consider some of the more complex issues that we're looking at. So that the legal part's a big issue. We're not fast enough on our feet, and we're being rolled constantly by technology giants. The other thing is this idea of that they should fulfill ethical principles. Well, I'm sorry, we don't know who's writing the algorithm. We don't know what data they're using to process that. And it's all classed as commercially sensitive, but we can't verify, we can't impose penalties if we don't know how it's being done. And how do we enforce it? So if AI is going to take a bigger role in some of the work we're doing, we have to ask, do we really want it? Do we really need it? Is the data being collected, the intent and purpose right? And should we just say that's not applicable? Because we don't want to reinforce bias in our algorithms. We don't want to not serve. Currently, the algorithms used by some of our private car companies tend to have the drivers circling around districts with a little bit more money. Okay, that's where their drivers are, because that's what they tend to get. But say someone calls from a very poor neighborhood. They don't have that much disposable income. But if they're calling a cab, it's usually because it's something important. And we have no visibility of what's happening there. So there's a level of rapid deployment and use. And we have a trust model and a societal model which perhaps doesn't actually meet. And so while we've talked about data, we have to talk about the trust model and then human oversight and value of that. We also have a big catch up on our capacity to actually deliver. Everybody knows algorithms are going to be important. Our artificial intelligence will be used. We're not sure how and exactly, but it is going to. But our capacity to do it, when we've tried to recruit some people from my previous job, basic people leaving university with any experience in artificial intelligence, and they were being offered salaries which were double the standard in Spain. Yeah. And we still couldn't fill them. We had to recruit from Eastern Europe.
Let's drill. That's an important point, Gareth. Let's drill down a little bit more on that, I think, because actually if we're going to have sovereignty and control in Europe, we need to have the skills and the expertise to actually develop these algorithms and the data analytics, etc., for ourselves and have that insight. So maybe I'll just bring in William here, because is it your sense that urban transport, urban mobility can attract the right quality of people? But, can the public sector attract the right quality of people when the private sector, as Gareth says, is potentially offering six-figure salaries?
That's interesting. Six-figure salary is an interesting comment, but actually we have started to observe, these kind of the events happening around us, which is indeed true. Because, for example, computing science, big data analytics are the hot topics for the majors. For the courses that students are taking these days. In contrast, sharp contrast to a lot of business courses as well. So I think one of the highlights I want to make is the importance of understanding the subject as well as understanding your methodologies, your tools for AI algorithm development. So we still see a lot of the interested researchers very actively working in urban mobility sector. So we've got a transport study center in Imperial College, for example, as well as in University College London. So both are the London-based university. But also we start to see that there are a lot of crossovers. So, for example, students they study their first degree as computer science, but they moved on to transport for their second degree afterwards. And then we see that as a very important movement for people who have got the in-depth knowledge for both subjects, who can actually make the right decisions, because you can't just really derive your codes without the understanding the context at all. And we see that actually are the key future resources which will be contributional to the key markets as well. And we welcome that kind of trend from a university point of view. So that's how I take that key skill sets, but with a blend of different types of understandings of the sectors would be helpful for the sector, for the industry.
Okay, thank you. I just want a quick comment from Niels. How easily can you recruit the people you need, Niels, in a city like Eindhoven? You said it's a tech city, but can you get people who understand both transport and algorithms?
We can, but it takes time and effort. And that's not a problem, but I think there's also a challenge to get this stance that we really need these people to the right level of our board, of our directors, of the people that are hiring. So I guess also the education need is a bit might be a bit higher in the organization than on the around operational level. It actually is to get this awareness that we need such people, that we need to be an attractive employer for them, and that we need to pay them according to their skills. That is the problem. I think the people can be found. And if not, we can import them from somewhere else. We're an international region, but this awareness that there is some black box that needs to be opened to get this field developed fully needs to be through all the organizational levels.
Yeah. Okay. Now we're running a bit short of time now, so what I want to do is, we've got one of my colleagues is going to be, he's on the stage later with Jean-Eric Paquet, the Director General of DG Research in the European Commission. Now, he's asked us to give a couple of recommendations from each of the workshops about what the Commission should be doing. So I'm going to just go around each of the speakers here, but I'm going to, and not just for the Commission, I want a suggestion, a priority for a policy recommendation at the EU level, and a recommendation at a city sort of national level. So I'm going to give you one each for EU and one for national or city. What would be the thing that policymakers need to do urgently to help oil the wheels of smart mobility? I'm probably going to start with Gareth, because he's probably thought about this a lot. And so if you can give two recommendations, Gareth, one at EU level, one national city level.
I would say on the city level, this is easier because cities can do it. We have some living labs there. We need to be able to test AI applied to some of our actual day-to-day challenges to work out their value and work out how they operate. And we will probably need leeway from the government because we're using lots of personal data to make it worthwhile. Companies can do it because they get us to sign and say, I accept conditions, and we never read them and they do whatever they want with their data. While public sector, we have to spend so much time. Maybe we need some sandbox set up in our living labs and we're given support to actually perhaps do something wrong, to let us actually try it, knowing what we're doing is a temporary action and we're bending the law and going around it, and people might have to be informed, but we need to be able to use it and make mistakes because companies and commercials make mistakes all the time. We only ever see what they succeeded in. There's a level of transparency in public transport systems and investment that we're very accountable. Let us make mistakes in it. And that would be key for us. Okay.
That's good. And just at an EU level, Gareth, what
EU is to do with skills. You know, we do not have skill level. When I say skills, it's both workers to deliver it, but a societal understanding of what they're doing with our data, why are they doing it, and an informed society that's aware of the challenge. If not, people will be very fearful. They may block development. We need skills in actually delivering it and skills in understanding it.
Yeah. Okay, that's very clear. Thank you, Gareth. William, can you give us one recommendation, national, one at EU level?
Yeah, so for me, I think on the EU level, so as actually Gareth just mentioned in his earlier conversation, there is a bit of the digital sovereignty, so digital privacy issue, which also, looking at how overall AI technologies as a level, which is sort of sitting between Far East China and also Far West America. So we've seen some published book, so where are the superpowers for AI? And people still think about US and China these days. And we, Europe, should really position ourselves correctly. I mean, there are a lot of advantages that we can take as a European, diversities and also the power of the intelligence that we have got, and also the university outreach and collaborations. We should really take advantage of that. So what I'm trying to highlight is, if there is a possibility, we should look at an ecosystem for these intelligence collaborations, really to promote the AI technologies into the right directions. As mentioned, from our findings, we do find a lot of the AI technologies or AI activities have focused on the university research, but there is quite limited output coming from university spin-offs because there is still a big gap between the universities and the market. And I think the investments could potentially be helpful to bridge that gap, to really put that, the in-depth research from universities into the marketizable applications within the sectors. And I think that will potentially be a key strength for European countries to also compete against those two superpowers I just mentioned. On the national level, I'm based in London. So London is one of the top hubs for AI technologies. We do, in London, they do have got a lot of the, different sector-focused AI technology hubs as well. And in terms of the advices, I personally don't have too much on that as well, because I've seen London as being quite active for that. But again, maybe for international collaborations, by exchange the learnings and also the market activities with the other parts of the world would be quite helpful. So form more collaboration partnerships would be interesting.
Yeah. Okay, no, good stuff. Thanks, William. Now, Niels, let's just turn to you. You've obviously you've heard what the others have said. I'd be interested to comment on, particularly on what Gareth raised about this idea of creating sandboxes where people can experiment in cities and actually test new ideas without having to jump through too many bureaucratic hoops. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I totally agree with that, and I think the basis for that is quite well in place in certain cities. So that's That's a good starting point. But also, I think it really is about knowing what you actually want, because this data technology and AI, it's definitely not neutral. So I think it's also our role to make decisions and policy choices on the application of this AI in the public space. So what we need to do as cities is to have a vision on digital inclusiveness, for instance. Do you want to have like parking services? Do you want to have them obligatory for everybody? Do you collect the data for it? To who will you share the data with? So this vision that really needs to be done on a city level, and you have to also engage the public with it to make sure that the general public in the city does know that you're doing this. So I think we didn't talk about that a lot, but the citizens' engagement in this kind of issues is also crucial. So that one is on the city level, and in the EU level, I actually agree with William says. And then as a city perspective, I think it's really interesting to get a feeling on this business cases and the business model that is behind all this, because there's also a question, of course, on business cases on a city level. And we have to get a clear feeling on the value chain of this new use cases.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I mean, it keeps coming back to money, essentially, which is it's a big part of the equation. Just got a few minutes left. There's one of the groups, Dimitri's in the chat. He said one possible recommendation would be to identify a number of pilot testing sites in European cities, identified by their relative involvement in relevant smart specialization strategies, ongoing, already funded by the structural funds. So, in other words, have a systematic program, I guess, that's of pilot testing across different European cities. What are your thoughts on that? Maybe, Gareth, do you want to respond to that?
Do you know, I think there's lots of living lab structures, but what we're talking about is almost like derogation from the normal. I'm not going to say we're going to abuse GDPR, but let us make mistakes, which will require control, regulation, and verification of what we're doing within limits and times, but allow us to do it, because if not, we will be frozen and only do it when it's perfect. And that way we will not learn, and we will not be able to move our projects forward. So companies benefit from that, we don't. They keep it hidden and make their mistakes. So I think if we did choose any of the living labs that are coordinated and supported by SSS or any of the other European living lab networks, it would be fine as long as we had a defined number and that was given and we knew what the rules were. That would be great.
Yeah, this goes back to your earlier point about how fast this whole area is moving and keeping pace with that. Just as a final comment, maybe Niels and William can also comment on this. Is it possible for policy, is it possible for the public sector to actually, and regulation in general, to keep up with the pace of change?
Good question. I think you're always going to experience a lag in it. I'm not too concerned about the risk of making mistakes and facing high fines or things like that. I'm much more concerned in what it does with public opinion and the political fallback that goes with it. So for me, I guess instead of focusing on the legislative gap, I think it would be good to focus on something that we actually have some control over, and that is how this all reflects to the general public.
Okay, and just a final comment from you, William. I mean, do you think that the public sector? Well, I guess I think
there is a possibility. Yeah. Can you hear me?
Sorry, go on, William.
All right, cool. So if I sort of answer Dimitri's question first, identifying a number of pilot testing sites But actually, according to my limited knowledge again, but associated with EIT, there are a number of the strategic initiatives, identifying the key pilots sites, such as there is a so-called European network of AI excellence centers. There are also European AI Alliance and also AI for EU. So these are the existing platforms which actually have already, integrated different types of the pilot sites for European countries, European cities, to look at the AI technology stuff. But to answer your question, David, so if I give an example, I think there is a chance. I've been involved in the cybersecurity for the CAVs, connected and autonomous vehicles, in the UK. And the way how the UK government did was that they assigned a program maker called Zenzik, and they actually produced so-called CAV Roadmap 2030. So it's from now to 2030, which includes all the aspects in relation to CAVs, including AI strategy and also cybersecurity as well as part of the key components within the CAV journey towards 2030. So I think to adopt a structured approach to really look at a roadmap, and they produce white papers. They endorse feasibility studies to invite different industrial partners and also universities to participate in studying the policies, in studying the feasibility studies together, in order to coherently form a strategy for this particular sector. Is probably one of the best ways to do it. So in this way, they work very closely with the government, but they also consult with the industries and academia to understand the full perspectives about the subject. And I think that might be an interesting program that could potentially, be a similar model for your question, David, which is how could you, produce a policy-driven, a coherent AI strategy for the whole European countries.
Yeah, okay. So it's one way for the public sector to get a grip on this, which is, a good suggestion. So we've run out of time, so let's end on that positive note. It's good to have a concrete example. So I'd like to thank our speakers. Really good insights, really interesting discussion. As I say, we will be writing an article up from this, so look out for that on the Science Business website. Can I also thank the participants, the audience, for joining today, and thank you for your questions. I'll encourage you to join the plenary sessions this afternoon, which will hear more about the broader context, particularly around technological sovereignty and digital sovereignty, and how Europe can improve its technical know-how and expertise in these fields, which is a reoccurring theme, I think, for the continent and for some of these challenges. But thanks again to you all, and you can, if you so wish, you can continue this discussion, I think, through the B2B tool that's accompanying the event. So you can, I think, connect with the speakers and other participants through that tool. So thanks again all, and we'll close the workshop there. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, David.
Thank you, David.
Great. Thanks again. Bye.